Hello, my name is Mark Taylor. Welcome to the Education on Fire podcast network. This show is sponsored by the National Association for Primary Education. Do you need help and support in creating and embedding music in your school? If so, we have created Primary Music on Fire to help you with just this, a music membership site that's taking the fear out of teaching music by giving you the step-by-step skills and ongoing support you need to produce lifelong musical memories for you, your school and your pupils. Go to educationonfire.com/primary-music. Hello and welcome to the Education on Fire podcast. The place where we share creative and inspiring learning in our schools. Season 6, Episode 92. Hello, this is Mark Taylor. Welcome back to the Education on Fire podcast and our English literacy season. Today I'm very excited to be joined by Simon Hunt, and Simon will have so much to chat to us about today, all the way ranging from poetry and talking at conferences and being in America and his website, which has got so many great ideas and resources and a great following. So Simon, thanks so much for chatting to us today.
No problem, thanks for having me.
So after that very sort of brief introduction, can you sort of fill in some gaps in terms of exactly what you're doing day to day, and then also that, as I sort of mentioned, all those extra things that you've been sort of drawn into with your great experience so far?
Right, yeah, so I'm currently a Year 4 teacher in Tottington, just around the corner from where I live. So I've been there for my third season, so it's my third year group, so to speak. So I've been with them, this is my third year now. Previous to that, I was in Year 6 in Bolton for about, I think it was 5 years, and before that when I first started teaching, I didn't really know what year group I wanted to teach, so I taught in reception for my NQT year, which was such a difficult year. From there I did supply teaching for a couple of years and kind of bounced between different year groups to decide what year group that I wanted to go into, and then that's when I ended up in Year 6. So at the moment I'm just gone down to 4 days at Christmas, so I work Monday to Thursday in my class, and then on the Friday I work with Lit Film Fest and kind of do my own thing on that Friday. And that's very recent that I've had to do that, just because the stuff I've been doing outside of class I've just not had time to do it. So having that Friday gives me time to concentrate on the things I'm interested in externally and outside of school. Yeah, and I'm an SLE for Bury as well. So I've recently, actually this week, did a CPD session, a group of PGC students, and it was just really interesting to fast forward from 10 years of my teaching career, when I remember being in those lectures. 10 years later, I'm now on the other side, and it just felt a bit surreal being one of the lecturers speaking to students, where 10 years before I would have never thought I could have done that. And I think that's kind of, I don't know, that shows what you can do in your teaching career and where it can take you, because I had no idea that I would end up doing CPD sessions, going to America, going to Brussels, all these different types of things I've done. When I first started teaching, I thought, right, well, you're a teacher, then you're an SLT, deputy and head, and that's pretty much all I thought there was in education. But now, through experience and just through chance, really, I've found out there's so many more things in education that you can get into I just didn't know at the start.
I can imagine that whole kind of sort of, like, say, the teacher-pupil idea of sort of having been a student and what that's like. And you can remember it really clearly, can't you, no matter how far out of it you are. And then to sort of stand, I always think the same when I'm teaching things, sort of standing the other side and giving that back. You think, oh, yes, but I still feel like the same person who was there receiving it not that long ago.
I mean, because it goes so quickly as well. I mean, time does go quicker the older you get. And I used to sit at the back of the room, so the lecturer just wouldn't ask me many questions. I remember sitting in the corner thinking, oh, just don't ask me to do anything, don't ask me to volunteer. And then a few years later, I'm kind of almost picking the guys at the back that I know they're sat there like I used to do, because I know you just kind of go with it. And then it's just so surreal that I'm on the flip side. And yeah, and I think it's nice when I did speak to the students this week, I did say, I remember not that long ago I was sat there where you are now, and it's strange for me. So just breaking that barrier that you might be a lecturer, but you're still a teacher and you're still a person. You're still someone that's been in that exact same position that they're in. And I think they relate to that, and I relate to it the other way around as well. Yeah,
and I think it's a great thing as well, even from that sort of teacher to sort of young pupil kind of relationship as well, isn't it? Just remembering that, we're delivering all this content and we're talking to our students, but actually, when you are 7 or 8, that relationship of understanding what it was like there, even though that was even further back. But just who are these people that I'm engaging with every day, and exactly how are they thinking and taking it on? And I think if you can have that in the back of your mind as well, that must be a real asset as a teacher in the school.
It is, yeah, definitely, and yeah, I just found it's such an interesting thing to be part of, and I enjoyed it as well, because with the PGC students, they were so interested in everything you had to say, and even when I talk about the things I've done in my teaching career, it kind of, you almost have to sort of, when I sit back and create a presentation and look about what I've done, you think, well, actually what I have done is pretty cool. Actually, I never thought any of these things would have happened, and it kind of, I almost reflect myself when I'm getting things ready and kind of go over stuff that I've almost forgot that I've done. And yeah, I just find it really interesting when I do these sessions.
And do you find part of that is sort of not a kind of celebrity status, in as much as, I know your Facebook page, Mr. Hunt's Ideas, is yeah. very popular, and you've got your website as well, Mr. Hunt from the Front, and these sort of PGC students, do they know you already through all of that kind of thing?
Yeah, some of them did. I mean, the one I always get noticed for is the floss dance thing that happened roughly this time last year, which that was just something we did at break time, and I thought, we just did a little video, stuck it on the internet, and within a day it was trending above Winnie Mandela's death on the internet. It was really surreal. So some of them do know me from that, but my worry, actually, going back to that, is when that did come out and it kind of pinged all around the internet, it said something million views, which was ridiculous. I thought, I hope people realize I do actually teach as well. I don't stand there swinging my hips and my arms around. I do teaching as well. I teach as well. So that was my worry at the time. But because of that exposure for the school and for me, it kind of got my foot in the door in other places, which without dancing I would have never got to in the first place. So yeah, and then people like my page because they like that video, and then they actually look back and think, well, actually he does put some good ideas on there, and I've used him at my class as well. So it was a foot in the door to other places and other avenues. But yeah, I still get, especially in Tottington, near where I live, I see some of the parents go, "Oh, you're gonna dance for us today?" And I'm like, "Oh gosh, please." I should charge for it now.
Yeah, exactly. It's taking it with good grace, like say a year down the track is it's an interesting concept.
It is, yeah.
The other thing I really like about lots of the things that you've done is that, we talk about cross-curricular, but a lot of the things I've been talking to people about recently have been very much about the fact that children don't think in that subject idea in the way that we sort of deliver it, or the way that things are set up now. And the fact that you've, talking through poetry and actually the use of technology and all the different types of things that you do you sort of see it as a whole, or do you still sort of have to compartmentalize it all just because that's maybe what you're being asked to do or being advised on at any given time?
I think if you put them in boxes, you kind of almost cap in what the children are able to do. I think the cross-curricular routes are the best because, for example, with poetry, I've always found poetry is something that children just don't like. They don't like doing it. And the reason why is because a lot of teachers have this negative view of poetry. So what tended to happen when I was in year 6, I'd get children, I'd say, right, we're going to do poetry, and you could see them going, "Oh, I don't like poetry," because a lot of teachers don't like it. And the reason why is because children get so obsessed with rhyming the last word of each line of the poem, they actually forget the process of it. It's just creative writing. It's just writing things down on a page and putting ideas. And obviously when they do get to year 6, the focus is on spag and grammar, and it just loses it. It kind of stifles the creativity. And also a lot of teachers do at Christmas, they'll do an acrostic poem at Christmas, or they'll do, I've got to do poetry for a week. I've got to squeeze it in. And then the children, if the teacher's not in, you can see it all the time, if the teacher's not into the subject or doesn't come across as if they're into what they're teaching, the kids know straight away. They know if the teacher's not, if the teacher's not enjoying it, the kids know straight away. And then they sort of disengage and they click off as well. But through the use of technology, because we always record our poems, because poetry is supposed to be performed. So we always record our poetry for the children to watch back, and then they can see how they speak, because lots of them don't actually listen back to how they speak. So part of the curriculum is intonation and pitch and tone of voice, but if we don't get the children the opportunity to listen to themselves back, then how are they going to adjust and change how they speak or how they read? So by filming things, especially poetry, they're actually able to look at it back. And then what I do tend to do when I teach poetry in my class, and I've always done this, I don't tell them we're about to do poetry. I just tell them we're going to write ideas down on paper. because I know if I say we're going to do poetry, they'll switch off, some of them. So I do that at the end, and then when we create a poem, a whole class poem together, which is how we did the one that took us to European Parliament. When we do a whole class poem, then at the end we put the ideas together. So actually we've just created a poem here, and oh, it's really easy and simple, and then they understand, it's not about stifling, it's about being a bit creative, and then poetry gives you that opportunity to do it. And also what they do like doing is, there's a poet called Paul Jenkins who says this as well. He says the reason why children like poetry when they get, when they have experience with it, is because they know they're breaking the rules of grammar. But the good thing about breaking the rules of grammar is that they know there's rules there in the first place. So if they know that they don't have to put a full stop at the end of a sentence because it's a poem, if they're aware of that, then they know they're breaking the rules in the first place. So they must know the rules at the start. So it kind of, it just gives you that freedom to just be a bit, I don't know, break some rules and just write some ideas down and be creative. And I love poetry. And it's, when I was a kid, and even when I first started teaching, I never thought I would say that, because that was one of the things I thought the least comfortable teaching was poetry, because I just didn't have a good experience of it.
I think for me, or what comes to mind now is I had a conversation this week with somebody, and they were talking about the same thing in relation to music. And they were saying, as soon as you mention to a class of children, now we're going to do some composition, they all switch off, they freeze up, they don't know what to do, because they expect, or this particular example also said that they expect in their mind, they see a grey-haired sort of German old person who's done something, that's sort of their, oh, that's the sort of thing we're going to do, or that's the sort of person I need to be able to do it, or, it just conjures up all these images, and where they come from is amazing, even at such a young age, what they perceive it actually is. And they were saying exactly the same thing. Don't call it this, go down a different route, just give them a chance to experiment and to explore and test sounds and all that sort of thing. And it sounds like exactly the same thing, because they're just creative and in the flow and going with what they need to do within the the boundaries or the environment that you set. But it's just a very different atmosphere to begin with.
It is. It's just play with language, just like with music. You just play, just have a go, have a mess, have a play, and see what you come up with. It's the same with poetry and with literacy. You just play with language, play with words, and just give it a go, and then see what you come up with. Because the grammar stuff, which is always a focus in primary school to year 6 especially, that's something you can sort out later, and then you can look at that once you've written something. Then you can go into the grammar. If you start at grammar first, I mean, it's boring. I'll be honest with you. Teaching grammar isn't the most exciting thing, but once you've got something there to then look at, and the examples they're using are the children's work, then you can teach grammar through something that they've got down in front of them. And that's just something I just love teaching poetry. And it's lots of things that I've been able to do outside of teaching and through teaching has been from a poem that I did in class on a wet Wednesday afternoon in Bolton, the first one. So it's kind of And I think it's important that as teachers that we, there's so many people that dislike a subject from being a kid and not enjoying it at school, and it can have an impact for so long. I mean, you speak to anyone that's been at school, they can always remember their favourite teacher, and they can always remember the lesson they don't like, and it's usually because they had a bad experience within that lesson. It can go all the way back to reception and even earlier. So it's so important that we give children the positive experiences in all the subjects, so then they can explore and can see what happened with those positive experiences.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that's so important. And the other thing I was just going to follow up from what you said before, you were talking about recording the poems and that kind of thing. Is that just a very different experience now, because you can do it on an iPad or a device, and so it can be a bit more personal rather than that kind of, now we'd like you to stand up in front of the class and recite your poem. Is there that sort of personal element to it now, which makes it a bit more accessible and less fearful for them?
It is, and it's really easy to do. And lots of children, if you ask what most primary school children want to do when they're older, they all want to be YouTubers. That's it's like a new job that existed, didn't even exist a few years ago. And you can tap into that. Well, YouTuber would have to write a script, they would write something down, then they would record it and edit it and go back to it. And by using recording poetry, for example, they're technically being YouTubers. And then if we put their work on YouTube through the school YouTube channel or on my Facebook page, then they become YouTubers, and they get likes and follow it, and they get views, and they see people watching it around the world. And it's just kind of, it's tapping into their interests. It's using what they like to help you teach the curriculum.
And In terms of, like you said, now working 4 days a week rather than 5, how did that come about? Was that something you were able to organise with the school, or was there sort of a natural chance for that to take place?
It was difficult because I love being in class. It's my favourite thing to do, is to be in a class, speaking to my children, and then just being a teacher. That's what I'm good at. That's what I enjoy doing. But I had the opportunity to work with Lit Film Fest with Dominic Trainer, who you've spoken to recently. He'd seen some of the stuff online, and from that he said, would you like to do something like that with us? And at first I was unsure, because it was a bit of a risk, because going from 5 days to 4, I'm out of class for a day, and then it's something that's out of my comfort zone. But over the past year and longer, we've been teaching children about growth mindset and taking risks and doing something different. And I thought, well, if I don't give this a go and try something different myself, then how can I then stand in front of children and talk about take risks, guys, do something different, if I'm not prepared to do the same thing myself? And through working on my Fridays now, it's just been since Christmas, I've been able to really, I've been writing some plans and some things with Lit Film Fest about World Book Day, which I would never have had a chance to do. And luckily for me, I work in a school that they're so supportive. My head teacher and everyone that I work with supports everything that I do, because also they see the benefit for the school, because the exposure we've had over the past few years through my Facebook page and the things that we've entered competitions and won equipment and technology, and things I always do are always for the school first, and then anything else is an offset for me. So they've been supportive as well, and it's going really well. It's also nice that every Friday I can take my boy to school, which is something that I've really, when you have children and just being able to take your child to school, that Friday morning is my favourite thing in the whole world, and I'm able to do that now. And it's also strange being the parent that drops the child off in the morning, waving them goodbye, from being for 10 years previous the other end where you receive the child and wave goodbye to the parent. It's so surreal being on the other side, and it's funny. So I've really, really enjoyed it, and I'm just going to continue working on my Fridays to really progress my career and just do something for me as well as the school.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. The fact that, especially those teachers that are parents as well, that, your children are there, and so many sacrifices often come in because you're doing it for the children in your school, but your own children, often don't get the chance to spend that time with, because you're at school, or all these things clash and that kind of thing. So I think any opportunity like that is a very special one, which is really lovely to hear.
It is. It's been good. It's been nice.
So take us through a little bit about some of the conferences you've spoken to, and you talked before about going to Europe. How did that sort of happen, and what was the details of those?
Right, so going to Europe, now this is a long story, so I'll start from the beginning. So about 4 years ago, I watched the documentary Blackfish, and for anyone that's not seen it, it's basically about how orcas, or killer whales, are in captivity in SeaWorld and different places, and Marine Park, different places around the world. They're too intelligent, and the conditions they live in doesn't suit them, basically. That's kind of the long and short of it. And I watched this on, I think it was a Saturday evening, around about October, and about 5 years ago now. And the week after, we had to do a balanced argument, and I thought, I can use this as part of my lessons, because 10, 15 years previous to that, I went to SeaWorld, and then I'd seen Blackfish, so I'd seen both sides of the story in effect. So the first Monday we got to school on the Monday, and I put a picture of me, and I had a basketball top, and I was about 16 years old with curtains as well. So I put this picture of me at SeaWorld and said to the children, I went to SeaWorld when I was 16. Let's watch a video of the killer whales doing one of the shows. So we watched the show, and it is impressive to watch when you're a child watching these huge animals jump through the air and swim with the trainers. And I said, right, who would like to go? So all 30 of them popped their hand up and said, well, let's do some persuasive writing to Mrs. Barnes, who was the head teacher at the time at the school that I worked at. Let's do some persuasive writing and try to persuade her to let us go to SeaWorld, because we'd like to see them in the flesh. So they were scurrying away and did lots of writing. And then we handed it to the head, and she said she'll have a look at the budgets and see what she can do. And then the day after, I just asked the children, said, how do you think those huge animals got there in the first place? And they kind of looked at each other and looked at me and thought, well, I don't know. How did they get there? And so I showed a clip from Blackfish, which is one where you can see the young orcas, so the ones that get taken away from the mothers. Mm-hmm. So they get taken away. Those are the original ones that went to SeaWorld in the 70s. And they kind of understood because they could relate to it. Imagine if they were taken away from their parents, they could sort of relate to that. And I said, well, let's delve into this a little bit more. Let's look at both sides of the argument. I'm not going to push my views upon you. I'm going to show you both sides of the argument, and let's decide how we feel. So we looked at the arguments for, we looked at the arguments against, and the children then decided that they were against the whole going to SeaWorld. So I said, right, well, let's write something the next day. So this is when I first did that poetry format that I did. So I cleared the tables, cleared the chairs, and then I rolled a huge piece of paper down do you know that backing paper that you get for your wall? It's like white paper. A huge roll of paper down the center of the classroom. And then I said, right, what we're going to do is I've got some headings here. We'll watch a bit of video, we'll have a chat, and then just write something down underneath each heading. And the headings were, the first heading was I used to be, and that was meaning orcas, how they used to be in the wild, they used to be free, fly through the ocean, and we just written some sentences down. And then I showed the clip of them being taken again. So the next heading was then they. So they had to write sentences around then they, how they got taken, how they must have felt when they got taken. And then the next heading was now. And now means how we showed a clip of the killer whales. They kind of circle in the tanks, quite lonely, with the collapsed dorsal fin. And they circle round, and then how you would feel lonely, how do you feel sad, and the fact that the different orcas taken from around the world speak different languages technically. And then will I, meaning will I ever be free and back in the ocean again? So we've written all these down on the center of on the floor, and then we decided to pick little bits of the sentences and we put it together. Then we read it with some nice music, and I said, we've just created a poem. And they were like, oh, is that what a poem is? Does it not have to rhyme? And so we had that conversation about how it doesn't have to rhyme. And then we decided, for the first time, well, we'll record this, and we'll record it with a green screen with some images at the back. So the day after we did it at lunchtime, we took some children, we recorded some of the poem, and because they all created the poem together, they all had ownership of this one poem. And then we put it on my Facebook page and the school YouTube channel, and then that was it really. And then the day after, an organisation called Antipark Marine, which is an organisation in France, they show facts and statistics about Marine Park, which is kind of like SeaWorld, but just outside of Paris. And they said, can we translate this beautiful poem into French, please? So I said, of course you can. Give them permission. And then within a few days, it had something like 200,000 views, like a French version of our poem with the subtitles underneath. And I couldn't believe that would have happened from something we did on a wet Wednesday in Bolton. So it's one of those things where, the week after we were going to do a different subject, and thought, there's no chance I can just go, right, guys, let's do a different book next week. Sometimes you just got to go with the flow, so to speak, because we could get so much more out of this. So I emailed one of the trainers called Sam Berg. So she's from the film. She's one of the main trainers who worked with Tilikum, the killer whale they talk about mostly in the film. And I said, is there any chance we could speak to you through Skype? And within a couple of days, she said yes, because she'd seen our poem. Someone had shared the poem to her, so she'd actually seen it. And so on the Friday, I said to the guys, right, we're all going to write some questions if we would like to speak to Sam Berg, one of the trainers, and they all knew who she was by then. What questions would we like to ask her? So we all written some questions down, and then after break, I said, right, we'll speak to her. Do you know when you sort of say things to kids, especially in year 6, sometimes they don't really 100% believe you, because as part of teaching, you kind of sometimes lie to them depending on what subject you're doing. So they didn't really believe they were going to speak to me. And in fact, Sam was in Alaska at the time, and she'd just spoken to CNN, and then she was speaking to Devonshire Road Primary School, which is a bit surreal. So she spoke to us for about an hour, and it was so interesting because, one, I didn't really have to do anything because the children came up and asked questions themselves, and two, just to see them having a two-way conversation with someone all the way other side of in Alaska, it was so interesting to see. So the week after, I shared the poem with Born Free, the organisation, Born Free, with Virginia McKenna. So I shared them the poem, and they said they absolutely loved the poem, and would you be interested in going to Brussels, because we're trying to get a bill that's being passed through in the European Parliament of basically the ban of captive cetaceans, and cetaceans are anything larger than a dolphin above, because they're too intelligent and too big to be in small tanks. Would you be interested in coming to Brussels? So I thought, right, okay. So I went to speak to my head, and I said, is there any chance you've got 10 grand or so knocking around that we can send some kids and myself to Brussels? And she said, I'll have a look, but I very much doubt it. So I thought, right, I can't just right, I'm going to try something. So I looked into European Parliament and MEPs, and I found a kind of a loophole that MEPs have a certain amount of budget for educational visits. So I contacted Sajid Karim, who's the MEP for North West, and I said, look, we're doing some work on EU Parliament. We're trying to get bill force through. Is there any chance we could, as part of your budget, could we send me a couple of other teachers and some students over? And within a few days, he just said yes. And I was like, right. I wasn't expecting a yes straight away. So I then had to embark on probably the hardest thing I've ever done, which is a risk assessment for me, 2 other teachers, and 10 children to go all the way to Brussels. But I did, and then I filled in all the forms, everything I needed to do. And in the meantime, at school, we were looking at balanced arguments. We were collecting signatures for the bill that was being passed, trying to get pushed through. The children collected something like 2,000-3,000 signatures, which is crazy, really. And we chose 10 children. Now, this was probably one of the hardest things we had to do, because how are you supposed to choose 10 children there was 60, so it was 2 classes, to go to Brussels? So we just had to randomly select them, because there's no way I could say you, and you. I couldn't, it would break my heart. So we just randomly selected. And what was so lovely, the 10 that did get selected, obviously they were really pleased, but the rest of the class, both classes, were really supportive of the children that got picked. So that was just nice to see. And then in the March time, just after the Christmas, we then we set off to Brussels. We had 10 students, myself, the deputy, and one of my TAs. We went down to Manchester Airport, flew over to Brussels, and we got a coach, and then we got a tram, and then we walked, and then we got to where we were staying for the few days. So we got there on the Friday, and we were staying there till the Tuesday. On the Saturday, we went to European Parliament to hand in our petition to Sajid Karim. We got to meet him, and we had some conversation. We had a tour around the main chamber. And then on the Sunday, as part of the work with Born Free, they wanted us to perform our poem in the main chamber live. So we went to the screening of Netflix, the documentary, Blackfish, in the main chamber of European Parliament, sat right at the front where all the flags are, in this huge auditorium with all these European delegates inside there, and then me and 10 kids from Bolton in their school uniforms sat right at the front. So there's a debate going on between SeaWorld executives and anti-captivity scientists, and then they invited questions at the end, and then my children then started pressing, the buzzers where the microphone is?
Yeah.
They all started pressing the buzzers. And at the moment, I thought, right, okay, what are they going to say here? How's this going to go? Because it was a bit surreal that what was all happening. So one of the boys pressed the buzzer, started to speak, give a really good, passionate view of and give some statistics to the SeaWorld executives. And it was strange, because they didn't expect a group of 10 and 11-year-old kids to give such detailed statistics and facts. And it kind of, the SeaWorld executives didn't really know what to say, because they didn't expect this to happen. And as a teacher, I was sat in the middle of European Parliament with my kids debating with SeaWorld executives and winning. And I thought, how did this happen from a poetry lesson in Bolton? So after that, we met the delegates from the anti-captivity crew from Born Free, and it was just, we had caviar, and we were treated like royalty in the European Parliament. And then the next 2 days we did a bit of sightseeing. Then we flew back, and then I remember getting back to class and thinking, right, okay, what's my next topic going to be? Because I don't know how I'm ever going to match or even come close to that one. Fast forward about 2 months later, I got a letter from SeaWorld, and it came through to the school. And I've got it here now. So the letter came from SeaWorld, and it says, "Dear Mrs. Barnes, who's the head teacher, we are writing to bring to your attention the anti-zoo campaign currently being headed up by a teacher at Devonshire Road Primary School. While we appreciate the subject of animals in zoological care is sometimes a subject of debate, I hope you agree that teachers have a duty to present all the facts and give equal prominence to conflicting views and opinions." And it was kind of aggressive letter. And I was worried at the time, because I thought, am I going to get sued by SeaWorld just because of some poetry we did and something that shared online? So I contacted Born Free and I said, this is what's happened. What do I do? Because I don't want to get in trouble here. And they said, well, what it is, the SeaWorld executives, they didn't like the publicity you guys had got and how your video had been trending. And what they do, they send this letter, like a blanket letter, but they change some details to people that are saying something negative about SeaWorld, basically. And a large percentage of the people will just stop doing it. But really, it's just something they do so people would stop. So I thought, right, okay. So I knew I was in the clear. So I then printed off the letter and all the statistics that they gave to us, and then posted them around the classroom the next day. And as the children came in, they looked at the letter and they were actually angered by me getting this letter. And then we wrote 60 very angry letters back to SeaWorld saying that the facts that they've got are incorrect, and this is why, and this is why, and this is why. And so it had, in fact, it had the opposite effect that they thought it was going to have. And then we didn't hear from them since.
Wow.
So yeah, and then about 2 years later, I kind of just forgot that we'd been part of this this law that was trying to get passed through. And then I got a letter in my post, and it's this big official letter, and I opened it, and it was a notice to EU members, and it was basically a summary of the petition, what's happening from now, and the fact that my class and myself are named on this European parliamentary law that's now being passed in EU countries. And at the time of sending the letter, I think 5 or 6 countries, including I think it was Bulgaria and a few of the countries had already signed up to the law. So from some poetry and from some balanced creative writing we did at school, my class from Bolton 3 years ago now are now named on an EU parliamentary law, which, I mean, if there's ever a purpose for writing and an outcome, I mean, that's the one. So it's, I know I've just spoken for a while there, but when I talk about it, it's just, it boggles my mind how this happened as well.
I think it's amazing, and
yeah.
I mean, and there are so many really interesting things in there. You know, in the thing I like the most, I think, is the fact that it makes everyone realise that, one, you can make a difference, or certainly that you have a voice. You know, even from those sort of initial stages of kind of, you know, can we speak to someone on Skype that's sort of related to something that we're doing, you know, and the fact that what you say actually has some impact, and then because you're using technology and you know, all those things, you have to sort of, you are making those decisions and you are making it happen in many ways, but then, like you say, it then just goes off in a completely different, well, not a different tangent, but just much further than you'd ever imagined that it would do.
Yeah.
You know, you wouldn't have imagined you were going to be in the European Parliament. But, you know, these things can happen, and if you just do what you're passionate about and you do it, you know, authentically and in a way, you just don't know what's possible. And I think that's an amazing lesson for anyone to listen to, let alone to actually have first-hand experience of in such a dramatic way.
And if you think those children that did that in year 6, the belief in what they're capable of now must be just huge, because when they go to secondary school and they're in a lesson and they talk about what you've done, we've changed law, and you've changed law at 10 and 11 years old, what are these children going to do when they get older? And also as a teacher, just to, you know, the possibilities is that I never knew these things could happen, but, you know, maybe just think big as a teacher. What can we do as a teacher? And it just, and giving those children a voice it was an unbelievable experience. And then last year I did a similar topic again. We looked at a Free Morgan campaign because I had good contacts from them, and so these were my year 4 children. So last year we did a similar topic. We did some poetry, we did some persuasive writing, but at the end of it, there's an annual conference in Seattle on San Juan Island, which is it's a small island just off the coast of Seattle. And the reason why they have this conference there every year, it's the Blackfish crew and a few other scientists and delegates from all around the world. They all convene at this little island, San Juan Island, just off the coast of Seattle. And the reason why is because it's surrounded by the Chinook salmon. They swim around there every single year around about July, and the killer whales, they circle the island at that particular point. And I got an email from Jeffrey Ventry and said, would you like to come to San Juan Island to present what you've done with your children? So I thought, well, when am I ever going to get an opportunity to fly to an island just off the coast of Seattle to speak to people about the work I've done in class? So I said yes straight away. And then in July last year, I was on a plane to Seattle by myself, ready to present some of the work my children had done. I got to Seattle. I got ferried over for about 5-6 hours from the coast of Seattle to San Juan Island, and I stayed in a little harbour in this gorgeous island. And then the second day, the Canadian Senate spoke about zoological issues, and then I spoke straight after him, and I spoke for about 45 minutes. And part of the session was speaking live back to the children back in England. So I spoke via Skype back to my children, and it was. I was really nervous when I first got started because I felt really out of my comfort zone here because it was something very different to what I'm used to. I can stand in front of 100, 200 children, no problem, but stick a load of adults in front of me that I've never met before, I'm a bit nervous. But when I actually got started and when my children spoke live back to the theatre, the whole audience, it was about the size of like the Palace Theatre in Manchester. It was a really huge theatre full of people from around the world. My kids had them in the palm of their hand because there were these 6 and 7 year olds talking really passionately about a subject that the whole audience were very passionate about as well. And afterwards I got to meet Ingrid Vesser, who's a really famous scientist to do with killer whales. I was actually reading her book on the way over there, and then she took me out for lunch while I was there, which again, it's surreal. And then the next day, Jeffrey Bentry from Blackfish said, would you like to come on my boat? We're going to see if we can see some orcas in the wild. So I said yes, and then I got up in the morning, got on the boat, and then within about half an hour, I was sat in the middle of the Pacific Ocean with 10 to 20 killer whales just circling me, just singing and splashing and moving around. And that is all because of some work that I did a few years ago. I was sat on a boat in the middle of the ocean with killer whales surrounding me, and it was just, and I kind of pinched myself that it even happened. So I'm glad I took a few pictures and videos. But yeah, so that's my Blackfish story.
Yeah, I mean, it is incredible, and I love the fact that obviously it's such a big part of your life, and obviously a massive part of the children's lives as well. But just to, to be able to, I would imagine every time you say it, you kind of get that sort of same feeling, and that sort of must be very proud of what happened, and all that kind of thing must come back every single time.
Definitely, and just when I speak to teachers about when I first started, I'm just a teacher that just took a risk and tried something a bit different, and who knows, the students I spoke to this week or people that I've spoken to previous, are they going to give something a go and give something a try that maybe they wouldn't have done before because they thought someone like me wouldn't be possible. But seeing that some like myself was able to do that by just taking a risk, then maybe they'll do something like that themselves, and I hope that some of them do, and I'd love to hear if any of them actually do something a bit different like that.
And from your experience of doing that, I know you've had lots of other opportunities as well, but recently you've been on a BBC Live session, haven't you, on a panel talking about literacy and primary education. And
yeah,
is it having these sort of real life experiences which just kind of really helps you sort of get that passion across that people can then relate to because you've actually been there, done it, and sort of got the T-shirt, so to speak?
Yeah, so I did actually buy a T-shirt while I was there as well. But so the way that came around is I was talking about social media and the impacts on social media and the positive side of social media at a CPD session called Lead, Learn, Lancs. So I was talking about how social media is on e-safety, because at the moment we talk about e-safety in schools. They almost look at just the bad side of the internet, which is there, but we don't always look at the positive side of the internet. And so I talk about how we should look at both sides and have that balanced view and balanced argument, because social media is there. Let's look at the positive side and use it rather than just scaremonger tactics with the young kids. So I spoke about that, and I used some of the floss example, because from that we did some poetry, we did some instructional writing and other stuff from it. So I used that as an example, and I didn't know, but in the audience was the producer of BBC Teach. And so afterwards she said, that was great, would you mind doing something to do BBC Teach? And I said, well, yeah, of course I would. I'd love to. And then they invited me onto the 500-word panel, the 500-word competition that was just finished a few weeks ago, actually. Would I be interested in being part of the panel with an author and Julia Skinner, who's one of the head teachers? I don't know if you know who Julia Skinner is, but she runs the head teacher's office, and she has a 100-word blog that she runs. So I said yes to that. I went down to the studios and I sat and watched the live lesson. And I sat at the back, and I actually got in trouble for waving at the camera off one of the producers because my class were watching the lesson back at home. So I thought, I've got to wave to them. So I waved to them, and she went, no. And it's just really funny that I got in trouble, and the kids were behaving really well in front of me. And then David Williams was one of the surprise guests that they didn't confirm until literally that morning, because they was unsure whether they'd be able to make it. And he came and he did a reading, and then after the show had finished, he was kind of stood right in front of me, and I thought, gosh, David Walliams is right in front of me. Shall I just have a word with him and just see if I can just talk to him and say how much I love his book? So I spoke to him, and he spoke to me for a good 5-10 minutes, and then he ended up recording a message for my class, for my school, for World Book Day, which was yesterday. So we actually got to show David Walliams saying hi to Tottington Primary School and I hope you have a great day. So that was able to show that yesterday. And that was all before I even did the live panel. So then I sat down trying to do the live panel with David Walliams and like in the audience looking away. And I was really nervous. But when I actually got talking about writing and creative writing with Christopher Eddy, who's a great author, and Julia Skinner, the presenter, my nerves calmed a little bit because it was something that I'm passionate about and something that I do daily because I'm in class. So it's something I kind of felt like I knew about. And it went really, really well. And then my mum's recorded it as well, so she's very proud of me. So, but yeah, that's just from one person. Again, a chance being in the audience of a session that I did talking about social media and the positivity of social media, and then from there, I ended up on the BBC.
And I love the positive side of all of that, and in so many different ways. I mean, here we are talking together a few hundred miles away from each other, and at the same time being able to share these stories with people that wouldn't have necessarily heard it before, and
exactly.
and like I say, there are so many positive things, and we should be quite rightly understanding and mindful of all the negative things as well. But like I say, that balance of either side of everything that we're doing is a really key factor, which I think is such an important thing for us to be aware of. Simon, I feel like we could chat for the rest of the evening, but it's probably we've covered so much stuff, and I'm really pleased that you've got the opportunity to have the time within your week to sort of to do a lot of these extra things as well as your teaching as well, because I think that kind of natural ongoing learning that we can all get from listening to people like you chatting, and I think is such a great. I mean, you could call it CPD or whatever you want to call it, but actually in reality it's just learning great things from people who've had great experiences that want to help other people, both in terms of their students but also in terms of the teachers and the people within this sort of education world. And I think that's the way that we all learn and we all grow, and that we can all share these experiences, which at the end of the day gives the people that are learning from us, I think, the best educational chances that they can. And what we've proved today is, through English, through literacy, but by just doing the work that you're doing day in, day out in school, that anything is possible, and it's the world is your oyster if you're actually just able to let that be the case.
Completely agree.
So we should make sure that we finish off by that people want to find out more about you and follow you, or at least go and check out the flossing video. That where can they find where's the best place for them to go and check all that stuff out?
Right, so my Facebook page is at Mr. Hunt's Ideas, so I post a lot of the lessons that I do and my ideas on there and share things that I'm passionate about. So that's at Mr. Hunt's Ideas, or if you go to my email, my website is mrhuntfromthefront@gmail.com, and I call it Mr. Hunt from the Front because everything I talk about, I can back it up because I do it in class. So that's what's really interesting when I do my CPD sessions, when I say this works really well because here's a video from my class last week doing it. This works really well, I did it yesterday, and this works really well because I did it this morning. So I think as a teacher, when you go to CPD sessions and when you go and see teacher speakers, I think when you know it's a teacher that uses the things they're talking about day in, day out, it just adds value to what they're talking about. And I think that's what I can bring to the table when I do CPD sessions, when I do speak to people.
I couldn't agree more. It's really inspirational just to chat to you, and I really love the stories, and I think we can all sort of appreciate and take some of that and hopefully take it back into our education world, which however we are involved in it. And thanks so much for sharing it in such an inspiring way today, and your time and all the effort you're putting in.
Thank you, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak on your podcast as well. I appreciate that.
Lovely. Thanks very much. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I just wanted to remind you that we have some free downloadable English and literacy resources that have been given to us very kindly by teachingpacks.co.uk. If you go to our website, educationonfire.com, and in the top menu click on blog, you will see each week I've been putting a free resource for you to download and explore to help you in your classroom. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to chatting to you soon. Thanks for listening to the Education on Fire podcast. For more information of each episode and to get in touch, go to educationonfire.com. Education is not the filling of a pail, but the lighting of a fire.